Hi, this is Peter Woolfolk speaking. Now, first of all, thank you so very much for listening to the podcast. Now, I am very excited to let you know that the podcast is now available on Amazon Alexa. You know the drill. Simply say, Alexa, play Public Relations Review Podcast, and she'll take it from there. And again, thank you for listening. And if you enjoy the program, please become a subscriber. Now, on to the podcast. Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk, producer and host of the Public Relations Review Podcast. When I conceived this program, my idea was to provide public relations practitioners with a wide variety of solid, useful information and guidance from public relations professionals across America. And we are doing that. I will continue to cover important topics such as crisis communications and artificial intelligence and other such important topics. But I will also address other issues such as diversity in public relations, marketing to women, public relations trends, various data concerns, and much more. From time to time, I will also invite vendors of public relations products on to help you better understand how these products can improve your efficiency and your effectiveness. You will learn a lot from our podcast, so thank you for listening, and please inform your colleagues about the Public Relations Review Podcast and continue listening. Thank you so very much.
Welcome. This is the Public Relations Review Podcast, a program to discuss the many facets of public relations with seasoned professionals, educators, authors, and others. Now, here is your host, Peter Woolfolk.
Welcome to the Public Relations Review and to our listeners across America and around the world. Katie Delahaye Paine, known to Katie Paine as their friends, but also known as the Measurement Queen, has been a pioneer in the field of measurement for 30 years. She was recently awarded the prestigious IPR Jack Felton Medal for Lifetime Achievement, an award made for lifetime contributions in the advancement of research, measurement, and evaluation in public relations and corporate communications. Now she has founded two measurement companies, Katie Paine and Partners and the Delahaye Group. Her books, Measure What Matters and Measuring Public Relations, are considered must-reads for anyone tasked with measuring public relations and social media. Now, Katie can help you with such things as producing an evaluation report that will impress your senior leadership, developing custom metrics that reflect accomplishments and how they tie to the bottom line, getting rid of those AVEs and replacing them with accurate measures of success, determining how to measure internal communication success, and much more. Katie joins us today from Durham, New Hampshire. Katie, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm excellent. Thank you.
Well, good.
Pleased to be here.
Well, first, tell us how you became interested in the measurement of PR items and issues.
My guess is my story isn't that unfamiliar to most of your listeners, because I have a degree in Asian studies and Asian history, which of course is relatively worthless in Silicon Valley, which is where I was trying to find a job. But I had one skill, which was I could put together an English sentence. And so, I got into marketing in Silicon Valley because I could write English, not because I could do math. But I realized when I sort of failed miserably in a couple of presentations that if I stopped using words and just started using numbers and graphs, people would listen to me and give me the budgets I wanted and the support I wanted. So after 10 years in high-tech marketing and public relations, I basically went off on my own. It was like, one more thing. I had done this amazing thing where I was under a lot of pressure, was going to lose my budget or my job, one of the two. And I said, okay, well, what was our objective? Our objective was to get messages across. How about if we read all 2,400 articles that we got published last year and see whether they contain our key messages? And so I hired somebody to do that for me, and I presented the results. And the head of our agency, which was Helen Knowlton at the time, said, anybody who's not doing this by the year 2000 doesn't deserve to be in business. And I said, thank you very much for your support, and I took a severance package and left. And I started the Delahaye Group and then sold that, and then I started Katie Paine Partners. But basically, it's always been about showing the value of communications in ways that are meaningful to people who don't necessarily see the value in communications, right? It's not really about justifying the existence, but just showing the value in terms of the desired business results.
So data really plays an important part for a lot of, as you said, people who might have questions about the value of it.
Well, data is a lot easier today than it was 30 years ago, let me tell you. I mean, back then, you literally had to have human beings clipping out articles from newspapers and magazines and reading them and coding them and manually putting them into an Excel spreadsheet. You know, today, you get all that stuff automatically from whatever system you're using. You've got Google Data Studio to create dashboards. You've got Google Analytics. You've got, I did 400 different versions of my old companies. You know, I mean, my old media measurement companies, there's 400 of them now. So there's lots more data going on around there. Now it's much more about tying it to what the business objectives are or the priorities are.
Well, you wrote an article that mentioned breaking up with the impressions and gives readers 4 alternative metrics that really matter. Can we take a look at what those metrics are and how listeners can take advantage of them?
Sure. I mean, before we get into the specific metrics, and I'm sort of echoing Elizabeth Warren, I do have a metric for that. I have a metric for everything, but
okay.
Where it's at a start is with what I call the sort of revolution in thinking, because the problem has been that success in public relations has traditionally been measured relative to advertising, right? I mean, impressions are really another way of equating public relations with advertising, and add value equivalency was obviously, you know, how many column inches, you know, what's the column inch value versus the advertising cost to buy it from advertising. None of that applies today, because if you ask senior leadership today, they don't see PR as necessarily a way to sell things. They see it as a way to make it easier to recruit talent, to make you more popular with your, you know, investment community, protect the brand from risk and crises. So the whole notion of equating PR to advertising has to go out the window. So that's the first, you know, you sort of have to go back to what does senior leadership expect PR to do for the company? And that's sort of where you have to start, because I can tell you what some suggested alternatives are, but you got to start with that mentality. And I guess that's sort of the first one is ask your boss, ask your boss's boss. You know, what do you expect us to deliver to your bottom line or your strategic objectives if you're a nonprofit? So the sort of the first piece is to define that, and then you got to get a little bit creative and say, okay, how do I translate my day-to-day stuff into something that reflects that contribution? And this is where you go talk to sales, marketing, market research, and say, either, you know, what makes people buy the product, which is always good to know, so you know whether you're contributing on that end, but also what makes people not buy the product. I mean, that's what you're sort of protecting against. That's your negative coverage, specifically, is the fact that if there are things out there, messages out there, or things out there about your brand that you don't want to see in print because they make people less likely to buy your product, then you got to be tracking that and measuring that. You got to measure the bad stuff as well as the good. And then the other thing is keep, you know, go find out what's ever been measured before, right? Because what senior leadership wants is not money I put out. I got more attendees to my event. I got more leads to my trade show. I got more leads from an article. I got whatever it happens to be, is look back over time and see what other things cost you to do versus what you're doing today. And the cost factor is important, because that, again, translates into something that senior leadership really understands.
So part of really is making sure that you understand what they're looking for and then find some concrete way of delivering some results that respond to their particular concerns there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, and a lot of times you have to come up with what I call an acceptable proxy. And let me explain what I mean by that. So, for instance, if you're working in travel and tourism, and you can't actually count the number of people who saw an article you placed and then flew into your city and went someplace and stayed in a hotel. You can't track that but there's lots of complicated ways of doing that. But on a realistic basis, that's not realistic. So when I was working with Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I said, what do you consider an indicator that they're inclined to come visit Atlantic City? And this is when Atlantic City was going through some rough spots. And they said, well, if they go to my website and download the visitor's guide, that's a pretty good indication that they're at least considering a visit. I said, okay, so if we track that as the outcome, is that an acceptable proxy? Yes, it is. Okay, great. Now, let's talk about what's likely to make them want to come to Atlantic City. So fine, so they've got some research, and their research said if it's perceived as a fun place to go with friends, and they had specific market targets like bachelorette parties and things like that. And so I said, okay, so if an article leaves you more likely to go visit Atlantic City, contains the message that it's a fun place to go with friends, contains a desirable visual that counteracts the myth that Hurricane whatever destroyed the boardwalk, if it has all those things in it, do you think people, and somebody reads it, do you think people are going to be more likely to visit? Yes. Okay, so if we track those things and we measure those as the sort of activity metrics, and then we track visits to the website, downloads of the visitor guide, as the outcome, is that an acceptable proxy for counting the number of people who, drive or fly in Atlantic City? And they said yes. So I got agreement from senior leadership and the people who are paying the bills to do that. And favorite PR story, when budgets got slashed and they fired the executive director and they slashed the advertising budget, they kept the PR budget. And that was because we had metrics that tied back to the original goals.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, and part of that, one of my alternatives is what I call the content quality score, which I generally refer to as a kick butt index, because we've all been through it, right? The boss comes by and says, damn it, we're getting our butts kicked, do something about it, or congratulations, you're kicking butt, but nobody ever says, wait a minute, could you please define for me what kicking butt means? And so the kick butt index is based on those things that make people do those things that you want them to do, whether it's visiting Atlantic City, buying a product, signing a petition for your nonprofit, coming to your museum, coming to your event. You have to walk backwards from what the desired action is into what are those things. And like for Atlantic City, it was dispelling a myth, having a desirable photograph, containing a message, leaving people more likely to visit. And so you have all these positive qualities on the one side, and then because it's earned media and you have no control, you also track the negative stuff. And one of your metrics becomes reduction in negative and increase in positive quality score.
Quick question now, when you talk about the measurables, and particularly for a tourist situation, how about phone calls to the tourist agency, the state or the local tourist agency that people are asking for data or information?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got that, that's gold, right? That's total gold. And anything like that where you have, for instance, if you have a request for more information page and you tag your PR stuff with, just put a slash tag on the URL for PR that says PR, and then how many people went to that give me more information page from PR activities. So yeah, phone calls are gold. I mean, if you're tracking phone calls, you're beautiful. But many people don't many people do that. Not everybody says, "Where did you hear about us?"
Well, it seems to me
if you say, if that's part of the system, then that's gold.
That's exactly what I was about to say, that somebody needs to build that in as part of the process of acquiring the information that helps make decisions.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, do you have...
And then another...
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that's exactly what I was
I'd rather
asking.
answer your question than keep on spouting.
There we go. No, I was about to ask you now, what are some of your other metrics that you look for?
Well, I mean, a lot of PR programs you'll see that their goals are increase awareness. Now, awareness is another word that is overused because things like Breast Cancer Awareness Month is just a stupid concept. I don't know anybody who's not aware of breast cancer. If 1 in 4 people get it, chances are pretty good you know about breast cancer. You're not the goal in other things. Like, I get this from clients all the time. My goal is to increase awareness. I'm sorry, you are UNICEF. Everybody knows about UNICEF. How about being a little more specific?
Okay.
Rotary Club was another one. Rotary, everybody's heard of Rotary Club. If you ask them what do they think they do, most people say they cook breakfast. They don't say they cure polio. I'm like, no, your goal is to raise awareness of what it is that you do or what you stand for or of a particular message or a particular positioning.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Google needs more awareness. Now, I don't work with them and they, obviously don't, but it might be that Google needs more awareness of their corporate social responsibility stuff, because that's a way of neutralizing some of the negative political stuff that's going on, right? I mean, there needs to be specificity in all of these things. Mm-hmm. So in that case, then you have to do a survey. You do a pre-post survey before and after your program, and you ask them, before you start anything, to what extent are you aware that Google does good stuff? Mm-hmm. Or to what extent are you aware that Rotary tries to cure polio? And you ask them in an intelligent way. You say, A, are you aware of the Rotary Club? Are you aware of what it does? And B, who do you think is working on polio cures? But you have a structured survey. It doesn't have to be very long, and it doesn't have to be very expensive. And you ask that before you start your program. Then you ask the same questions after you've done your program for a couple months. And then you have a number you can show, this percentage increase in awareness of what we do.
Okay.
Much more powerful metric than, I'm not saying that impressions are a part of that, because you do have to prove that somebody saw it, perhaps, at least have some evidence that you got some coverage out there of the thing. But ultimately, you need to have that data that says more people are now aware of what it is that you do.
Mm-hmm. So how about people who just don't have, let's say, a numbers background? Can this be made easy for them to do?
Well, it's really an attitude. I mean, it's an attitude and it's a problem, right? A big part of the problem is that many, many, many people did not do well in math in grades 0 through 8, mm-hmm. or high school or whatever, and therefore they go into quote unquote I'm a word person or I'm a people person. Those people are always going to be, I have friends and clients and people like that, and they're never going to embrace this stuff. They find people who do, and increasingly major corporations are they've given up trying to teach PR people how to do math. And they're just bringing in data analysts, and they're stealing people from accounting and stealing people from IT and mm-hmm. stealing people from all over who are used to working with numbers. But what's very exciting to me is I'm running into now college students who see the value of combining PR with research, with math, with some statistical background, and there's more and more programs are forcing people to take some level of data analysis or mm-hmm. statistics. Those are the people who will, I promise you, make $50,000 more a year when they graduate.
That.
So
That's interesting to hear you say
It's a
that.
big growing thing.
Now, I said it's interesting to hear you say that because I talked to a college professor about a week ago, and he was talking about what he sees as a deficiency in college students in PR programs, and that they don't have much creative activity mentally. Pretty much need to have things given to them. And he's rather disappointed in that. So he has to develop programs to help them do the kind of things that that employers will want.
Interesting. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. So,
I mean, there's some really, really good schools out there that are really emphasizing data analytics within their PR programs, and it really is much more about. I mean, those are the ones that are turning out the highly employable. Now, it's not that you can't learn. I mean, I do measurement camp every year, where I bring people to my house. This year, I might have to do it online, but we bring people here every year for a full day of training in Excel, in pivot tables, in statistical analysis, how to do dashboards, how to do surveys, all of that stuff, because people want to learn. Now, have I turned them into measurement mavens? Not necessarily, but they certainly go back and do. They're much better at showing their value to their senior leadership or their clients.
That to me, as I listen to what you've said, none of the things that you have talked about seem to be exceedingly difficult. It's understanding what you have to do. As you said, you have to collect information. And now what can I devise to collect that information in a relatively simplistic way to present some results to those who want to see it? I haven't heard anything particularly difficult here.
Well, I have a very good friend who has a very funny song. Some of the lyrics, which I will not repeat to you, I will send you a link. However, you might enjoy it. But it's like taking out the trash. It has to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also got it's like wiping it off your shoe. It has to get done. But the point is, there are some things that you cannot avoid today. You cannot just say, "Oh, I get this many impressions and this many people like me," and blah blah blah. There is, unless you attach a dollar sign to that, unless you say, for every $500 I spent, I brought in 1,000 of these, whether it's impressions or it's something else, it's not going to resonate with senior leadership. Mm-hmm. And then the point is, it's not just that I bought, here's a perfect analogy, right? So Michael Bloomberg spent $500 million to win, I don't know, one electoral vote, right? Mm-hmm. So that's not terribly efficient. On the other hand, if you're Elizabeth Warren and you spent $300,000 to get, or $3 million, whatever she spent, well, $20-30 million to get 100 electoral votes, she's obviously more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we need to think about our programs. Am I doing things more efficiently and more effectively than something else? Because whether you like it or not, PR people, you are being compared to every other tactic in the peso model. I mean, you are being compared to paid digital advertising, to events, to paid regular advertising, to podcasts, to anything else. Because ultimately, the chief marketing officer or the chief communications officer has a budget. They're going to look at how much I spent to get this outcome that I want at the end of the year. And I'm going to look to PR not as a cost per impression, but rather as a cost per lead or a cost per phone call or a cost of something to either, protect the reputation or increase the positioning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my other big metric is you've got to put dollars and cents in there.
Well, Katie, I thank you for providing us some information, at least to get started in our measurement efforts, and any sort of closing remarks you might have for our listeners.
Yeah, go to Paine, www.painepublishing.com. We have a newsletter that provides about 6 or 7 new articles every month on how to measure various aspects of communications. That's called the Measurement Advisor. And then painepublishing.com/measurement mall, is measurement-mall, is where you can find free white papers and other things and ebooks and all kinds of other stuff that we have produced. Not all free. Sometimes we try to make money on them. But all the books and ebooks and papers and everything else that we've ever done. So there's like 700, 800 pieces of content somewhere on Paine Publishing that can help you out.
Well, Katie Paine, it has been a delight talking to you today, and hopefully we can get back with you some other time and talk about some other areas of measurement in the public relations area.
I would love that. Actually, next time we can talk about things really complicated like measuring brand authenticity and trustworthiness and all those other things that I love to measure.
Well, I better prepare myself so I at least can ask maybe one question without embarrassing myself.
It's okay. I just spent 3 days in Miami with a whole bunch of academic researchers debating things like how do you measure authenticity and the outcome of corporate social advocacy and fake news. It's an amazing conference that I go to every year. So you're hitting me at a time when I'm just full of all this esoteric measurement stuff.
Well, once again, Katie Paine, thank you so very much. And also let me thank all of our listeners for joining us today. And please listen and prepare to hear us again on the Public Relations Review. Have a great day.
This podcast is produced by Communication Strategies, an award-winning public relations and public affairs firm headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, this is Peter Woolfolk. First, let me say thank you so much for being a listener. Now, I want to alert you to our shiny new podcast website located at podpage.com. However, you can go directly to the podcast site located at publicrelationsreviewpodcast.com. There, you can contact me through email. You can leave a voice message. You can leave a review. You can read an episode blog and frequently learn about the podcast guests. You might also want to suggest podcast topic ideas or even suggest a guest. You can also let me know if you would like to receive our podcast listener logo that you can post on your social media. So I look forward to hearing from you about our new podcast website. Thank you so much for listening to the Public Relations Review podcast, and have a great day.